Hey everyone, this is Chris, MTGO's Rec Start, and we're back for part 6 in what is quickly turning into a marathon week for the Show and Tell series. And here I would like to highlight this deck by Gonzzy. He only went 1 and 2 of this deck, but it was an attempt at the Old Fogey Challenge, and it was the only attempt of the week. And it was a really good example of the sort of deck that I was hoping to encourage with the challenge, and so I wanted to highlight it here. And I will have a game replay in a moment. But he has gone with Djinn's, which brings a lot of classic guys to the table. Djinn's early on in Magic's history, and the Old Fogey Challenge limits you to Alpha Beta Unlimited and the first few standalone expansions up through the Dark. And Djinn's early in that period of Magic's history tended to be undercosted creatures for the time, and have some sort of drawback was the idea. That was the ones from Arabian Nights were all that way. And then, of course, Mahamodi Djinn from Alpha Beta was your original. It's just a nice big flyer there, 5/6. And Serendib Djinn here requires you to sacrifice a land at the beginning of your upkeep, probably one of the worst ones. And if you sacrifice an island, he deals damage to you, which probably going to have islands if you cast that guy. Old Man of the Sea, actually pretty nice. For a long time I thought this guy's casting cost was 2 blue because Arabian Nights had a weird printing error where you couldn't really see the 1 very well from a distance if you weren't looking for it. But this guy lets you tap him, and then you can keep him tapped and hang on to a guy as long as the power is less than or equal to the old man's. So if they somehow get it above that level, then you can't take him. But he's got a Huzam Djinn here with a 5/5 for 4. The classic, this guy is still worth like $150 in paper, but less than a ticket on Magic the Gathering Online because his value is mostly due to nostalgia in the paper world. I can certainly remember having to look at with envy at some of my friends that had a set of these guys back in the day. It was very difficult to acquire, but he was the beat stick of choice to finish games in sort of the primitive blue-black control lists that would float around, that sort of thing. Sarah Angel was most notable for being the control finisher back in those days, but Huzam Djinn was also a big beating, and of course, because he was black, you could occasionally just spit him out early with a Dark Ritual or something like that. Dark Ritual and a Mox on turn 1 would get you there. So very iconic guy, and nice to see him. And Urnam Djinn, unfortunately, they do not have the original art. They have the Judgment art here. But Urnam Djinn was actually quite powerful and standard in the famous Urna Geddon deck, where you would lay an Urnam Djinn and then Armageddon the board, and they wouldn't have a lot they could do to this guy. Of course, he has to give one of your opponent's creatures Forest Walk, which if they're not playing a lot of creatures isn't a big drawback, but of course in Tribal Wars that's a substantial drawback since you're going to have to cast this guy off forests most of the time. So that does it for the tribal base, and then he's got Counterspell, Pestilence, which is a very powerful spell from the early days, and keep in mind that once you wipe the board, Pestilence does not stick around, mind you. So, but if you're playing all big guys, you can use this to pick off an army of little guys, for instance. So it's still very useful in that way. Again, the original art not available here, so the Urza Saga's art has to be used when playing it online. And Animate Dead just for value. Nothing really going on with this. But you know, again, if he counters something big or whatever, he can bring it back. Not a lot of people back in the day used it just for value like that. And then Felwar Stone from the Dark originally. Felwar Stone was, and you might know that one from Commander. I'm not sure if people play that in Commander, but it looks like the kind of thing that you probably would play in Commander. It's a good mana rock. It doesn't come into play tapped, so you can cast something else off it. Of course, he doesn't have any 1 mana spells here, anyways. But critically, that gets him ramped from 2 to 4, and all of his business, if you look at the pile here, apart from a few of these things, I mean, all of his beaters come in at 4, so he'd love to be able to cast a Huzam Djinn a turn early. So anyways, that is the deck, and let's take a look at a match real quick. And are you kidding me? Did I close that somehow? Okay, we'll come back in a second part and look at the match.